Which member left a demanding corporate career and moved to another continent to spend more time with family? Find out by going to www.bookinterrupted.com/members and get to know us a little more.
Parental guidance is recommended because this episode has mature topics and strong language. Here are some moments you can look forward to during this episode of Book Interrupted.
Welcome to our interview with Karma Brown, who is the writer of The 4% Fix.
What else have I said that I'm never going to do? Like skydiving, for example.
What do I want to think about today? Marsupials? What an interesting thing, right? Like just whatever.
Bust monitor belt, like with so much pride. I love buckling it on.
It was like an encouraging friend trying to give you that advice. So
I was like, if I can get up and just watch TV, then okay.
But why can't you?
All those things I used to do creatively just for me. I was like, oh, I actually haven't been doing those at all.
Yeah.
So now you've like inspired me.
I use a chocolate cake analogy in the book because I love chocolate cake. And I think a lot of people do. It can be vanilla cake. It can be a pie. It doesn't matter.
No, sometimes you just don't, and that's okay.
Probably a few months later, she sent me a note and she was like, okay, it works. I've been getting up early.
What do we think about this Roe v. Wade situation?
that to be happening, like going back in time, you know?
Yeah,
It
I
seems
know.
like we're going
This
back
is a
in
big
time.
deal.
You ready, guys? Let's do this.
Express yourself, share the wealth, hold on to your bookmarks, we're off the shelf. Express yourself, it's good for your health. Book Interrupted is off the shelf.
Welcome to Book Interrupted, a book club for busy people to connect and one that celebrates life's interruptions.
The following episode is Off the Shelf, brought to you by Book Interrupted. Ding!
Welcome to our interview with Karma Brown, who is the writer of The 4% Fix, which we read last season. No, when did we read that?
It was the
Last
book
season,
of season one.
and was Fan Lindsay's pick. So welcome, Karma.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you.
Thank you so
How are
much for
you?
coming on the show.
Of course, you're welcome.
It's so great to put a face to the
I was thinking
voice.
the same thing because when
Yeah.
you read a book, you put a voice to it. You know,
Yes, I
usually
know.
it's my own voice.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know. And it's funny. I have a lot of friends who have told me after they've read the book that they can hear me, on their shoulder through the book saying all those things and telling the story. So I did try very hard to just keep it in my voice, to keep it authentic. And I'm glad that came through, at least for some of them. And if it didn't, then those ones tell me anything.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know you, but that was one of the things I really liked about the book was, for lack of a better word, how conversational it was. Like, it felt like I was listening to a person talk to me. I wasn't just like reading a instruction manual or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that because that was very much the point. I don't typically write nonfiction. I am a journalist, and so I have done a lot of nonfiction in that format, but never in a book format. And I actually swore up and down I would never write a nonfiction book. And it's funny, the things that you swear you will never do, and then you end up doing them. And then you think, uh-oh, what else have I said that I'm never going to do? Like skydiving, for example. Somehow I see, maybe when I'm 75, I'm jumping out of a plane. But so it was a departure for me because I've done fiction mostly. And I have a voice in fiction as well. If you've read one of my books, you likely will hear my voice, even if the book is very different. My fiction voice has, a pattern to it, and it can be recognized. So nonfiction, I wasn't sure what my nonfiction voice was. I said to my editor, I'd like it to be slightly bossy, but also helpful or encouraging, just that authentic, honest voice, like, let's all try our best, but then also a little bossy, like, but you have to actually try your best. So that was what I was trying to balance as I was writing it.
Well, it's funny because as Kim was saying her piece, I was thinking it wasn't only a person telling you this or sitting beside you or whatever. It was like an encouraging friend trying to give you that advice. So that's how I
with
felt with
slight
it
bossy.
too.
I mean, I'm a little bossy. My husband and I were just discussing this the other night about how that's probably the thing about me that has been true my entire life. And I know a lot of people don't like using the term bossy because, you want to call women and girls assertive, and that's fine. But it all really means the same thing. And so for me, I was a bus monitor, and I wore that orange bus monitor belt like with so much pride. I loved buckling it on. This was in like the early 1980s because I'm getting up there, but I just have always liked sort of telling people what to do. And
I think you fine-tuned the art of it, because if bossy has negative connotations, I didn't feel any of that. You got the balance down. You were informed. Your bossiness was justified, I guess, right? You weren't saying, opinions.
Yeah.
You were like, here's what the research says, and do it if you want or not.
Right. Here's, what's worked for me. A lot of it is just, well, this is what I do. This is what I have tried. This is why it works for me. You can try it, riff off of it, find a way to do something like that, use it as some inspiration for what will work for you. But one of the things about this book that comes up so often is that people can't wake up early, because the premise of this whole book is to find that hour in your day that you can have just for yourself to do something you've always wanted to do, but didn't think you'd have the time for, not related to work, not related to productivity, just something that you're curious about, interested about. And a lot of people swear up and down the morning will never, ever work for them. And so it's like, great. Okay. It doesn't have to be in the morning. It works for all sorts of reasons, and it works well for me, but it might be 11 PM, when you have your time to focus on yourself. So
not fan Lindsay is one of those people. And not that she's not a fan. She's just not fan
not
Lindsay.
A morning person.
I am
but
not
she's got a job that goes into the night.
Yeah, I work at a restaurant. So like last night I worked till maybe almost 1:30 in the morning. So by the time I get home, I think I woke up at 10 a.m. and that was early for me. I was like, great, I got up at 10 a.m. I feel so good about myself. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you've been up since 5 hours.
I know, but I go to bed really early. I go to bed at 9 o'clock, I'm not always asleep by 9, but I am always in bed by 9. And if I have to do anything that takes me out of that schedule, I am not a happy person. I cannot operate anymore in the evening. So that's why for me, the morning at 5 a.m., I'm like, I feel great. I have coffee and I have time and nobody else is awake. And
you had enough sleep.
I had enough sleep because I was asleep by 9:30 or 10. So it works. But I understand if your schedule is different, the point is not to sleep deprive yourself, to get it done in the morning. The point is just to find the time and to be consistent about it as much as you can.
Yeah, like the way that you described it with the 24-hour pie, and make a slice specifically for you.
Yeah.
I like the idea that it happens first, right? Because you give away pie and by the end of the day, you might not have a slice left.
For sure.
Or whatever, right? But again, not everybody has the opportunity to take their slice right at the first moment of the day.
But you take it out. I use a chocolate cake analogy in the book because I love chocolate cake. And I think a lot of people do. It can be vanilla cake. It can be a pie. It doesn't matter. But you take your slice out, even if you're taking it out in the morning and you cannot use it, you wrap it up in a Tupperware. Let's not use cellophane wrap. And then you put it in your fridge or on the counter for whenever with a sign if you must. And really, that's the idea. I like the morning because then it's done and I can do it in the morning and it works for me. And I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day or think about it or feel guilty that I didn't do that for myself that day. So the idea is just, if you can't do it then, and you want to do this, then you have to find that time later and you have to make it as important as everything else you're doing.
Later is definitely harder because you're tired. And there's always this moment where I'm like, I should do this today so I don't have to do it tomorrow. And I think to myself, but what I really want to do is not that. Anything but that. And you're like, pause. Okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go do that thing. You go do it. And you're like, oh, it didn't take as long as I thought it did. But like, it's that switch. Sometimes you're like, but sometimes the decision is, I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Right, for sure. Or you'll do something else. I got this morning and I did not write anything. I did not read anything. I was on Twitter, feeling very angry about all kinds of things, like doing my rage deep dive in New York Times. And then I was playing this dots game that is this really weird random game that Instagram decided I needed. And I have become obsessive about it. And it is my brain candy when I need to just completely disengage. And it's basically just putting a series of dots together in various levels. And I'm not really a games person, but somehow this has, they got my number on this one. So, sometimes you have every intention of doing the thing that you're committed to doing, but sometimes what you need is something else. It's not really about the productivity. If you are relatively consistent, the thing that you've decided you want to achieve, you will get there if you just keep it top of mind. But if you can't do it every day, it's okay. It's not an all or nothing idea or concept.
It can't
or
be.
Shouldn't be.
It can't be, right? If you're a human,
No. Yeah.
and one time you do nothing and it's all or nothing, then you're done. It
It's
doesn't
over.
allow, you know what I mean? It
No.
doesn't allow for the
No, there's no flexibility in that.
Right.
And that doesn't work.
I like that you actually mentioned that while you're writing your book, there was, I think, a couple of weeks where you're like, I'm like a type A personality, high achieving, like I already did the thing where you wake up to get things done. But you saying those things, like it prevents you from feeling, oh, I didn't do it, so now I'm
a
let myself
failure.
down, or I'm failing,
Yeah.
or whatever. It's like, no, sometimes you just don't, and that's okay.
And that's still succeeding because you're giving
Yeah.
yourself what you
Yes.
need to eventually do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's a lot like exercise, right? I mean, exercise is such an obvious one because everyone has some kind of relationship with exercise. Either it is a big part of their life because it provides a lot of benefits, or it's something that they really think that they want to do and have not been able to integrate it into a habit. But it's the same idea. If you committed to doing something like getting up and walking every morning before your day begins, then if you don't do it, it's not like you just never get up and walk again. If you can't do it for a week for whatever reason, it's not like, oh, well, I guess I'm never walking. I'm never exercising.
Yeah, it's
So
over.
I read something this morning that was talking about how stress ages your immune system. And, so this is the problem with having an open-ended 5 a.m. my cake time, because then you end up in places you shouldn't be, which then just stress you out further because, stress ages your immune system, which is bad. But then you stress about the stress of your immune system. And then it's this, how do you get out of that? So
It's a perpetual emotion machine.
yeah.
Just keeps going.
I try to kind of, only give myself so many days where I am just freewheeling it through the internet because it can be a bad place. But every now and again.
It comes down to balance.
Yeah.
That's just it.
And balance is so hard. I'm really quite terrible at it, to be honest. I mean, I try very hard and I do all these things to try to find as much balance as I can. And some days are great and some days are not. And so I think now, at this stage of my life, that is the thing that I can count on the most. I try my best every day, and some days it works really well and other days it doesn't. But you don't stop trying. That was sort of the point of the book. You just don't stop trying if it's important to you. And if it's not important to you, then
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry.
Forget about it. The other thing that I thought was really endearing about your writing was your sense of humor. And I was really skeptical because I knew a little bit. And I was like, if this book tells me to get up at 5.
I know.
And then, though, you did the exact thing I thought you would do in my worst case scenario, which was right away be like, now get up at 5. But then on the next page, you're like, just kidding. And then you went on, right? And I was like, okay, we're good now. Like, this is...
Yeah.
She won me over. She did it.
Yeah, I don't feel like I can do justice with my explanation, but that was so meaningful for me that I was
Good.
a 5% fixer from then on.
Yeah.
I was
She
like,
actually did it. You were like, at the beginning, you're like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And
Those
then
are my
you-
favorite people.
And it was like a turnaround. You're like, actually, just coffee in the morning? Yeah, I'll
I
do that.
know.
I can
Cover
do that.
myself.
Yeah, you made it so digestible, so doable.
Oh,
that-
good. Thank
yeah.
you. I have an author friend who was telling me she would never, ever, ever do it. Ever, ever, ever. And I said, that's fine. It's okay. I mean, as I say in the book, you're a grown up, and being a grown up means you get to decide how you spend your time and what you do for the most part. And then probably a few months later, she sent me a note and she was like, okay, it works. I've been getting up early and I'm getting so much done. And I'm really, getting where I need to be with this. And I was like, okay, see, I mean, I never say I told you so, but
But in your head, you did. Inside, you're like,
but I could have.
I enjoy the people who are just so adamant that there's absolutely no way. And often, you're seeking something and you're resisting it because it feels impossible. But if you actually sit down and look at your day and look at your schedule and look where you can find that time, and maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 15 minutes, it is there. In almost everyone's life, it is there. You may make different choices about how you spend that time, like me with my dots or, the deep dive on Roe v. Wade, but it's there for you to use it however you choose. So I do appreciate the fact my husband read the book and all of a sudden he stopped and he's like, "You're actually pretty funny." We've been married for 16 years. Like, yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just simplified it. And then I was also thinking like, it's kind of funny because it's not rocket science, right? If you want to get up at 5, make sure you go to bed earlier. Like so many people are, the reason that they're not getting up at 5 is because they're going to bed at midnight and they're so tired, right? And you're like, well, try. And I love that you're like, if it's not an hour, go 15 minutes. That's how I started. I was like, I'll go to bed 15 minutes earlier. And I'll wake up 15 minutes earlier and see what that feels like. And then it was okay. And the proof is in the pudding. And you make the pudding so tasty that you can't not have a bite.
Yeah. And I think, it goes through, there are ebbs and flows in this. Like, as I said in the book, there are points that I didn't do the thing that I do not set an alarm. And unless I really, really have to be up, at that specific time, I just never even set an emergency alarm. And so sometimes I'll get up at 4 and sometimes I will get up at 6 and it's always early. That doesn't feel early to me anymore. Like 3 o'clock feels early now. And that happens sometimes because of the stage and age I am at. Sleeping is a weird thing now, but getting up early is the thing that now is just a habit for me. And because I don't have to set the alarm, I just don't have any angst around it. But sometimes I get up at 6 and I don't do the thing that I was supposed to do right away. And everything is fine. And I can get back into it when I need to, when I feel ready to do it. It just doesn't have to be this everyday thing. It may be more like seasons. You are an early riser for a season because that works in your life. And then you take a season off and then you come back to it with a different project or a different goal in mind the next time you're able to make that work. I do think that once you've done it and you've had some success or you feel that enjoyment of having that time to yourself, whatever it is, whatever you're choosing to do with that, it's kind of hard to not think about it again and to not want to do it again, even if you need to take a break.
Also found while I was reading the book, I examined how I was using my evening. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I'd be in my bed, but then all the way until 11, I'm looking at my phone or looking at the news or playing a game or whatever. And so then it was like, okay, well, how do I actually want to maximize my time? I'm going to have way more fun doing the thing I want to do in the morning than spending my time on my phone in the evening.
Yeah. And for some people, they may want to sit on their phone in the evening. Like I can't do anything at night anymore. So we watch a show. That's really what happens before we go to bed. We have a 14-year-old, so we are often kicked out of the main living room and then we are in our bedroom. This is what happens with a teenager. It's like everything turns upside down in your life. That works for me now. And I know that I will feel good and refreshed most of the time, right? In the morning. So I could stay up probably until 11 or 12 doing nothing. I probably could. To me, that's just not what I want to do. It's not how I want to use my time in my day.
And so I had the same experience as Lindsay, where I examined my time, realized my evening time that was taking me to like 11 o'clock at night. Mine was just TV. And I thought that I really liked it. And I still kind of do think that like for some good shows or whatever, but like even right now, I'm just going to go to bed. I think with children, sometimes this is how I developed this habit in the first place. You have a child, and when they're in those early stages, like toddler, even up to right now, my son is 8, so it's a little bit different now. But I developed this habit where I don't have any time that's mine while he is awake.
For sure.
And so when he goes to bed, I want to get all my time. And so that's why that time would get extended, but that time would be useless because I'm like, I just want to literally do, it turns out like nothing. I just want to have
shut down.
Yes.
For sure.
Right? Yeah. And so that was okay. And just like you're speaking, like seasons, whatever. But then now it's not as demanding. I do have my time also in the day while he's also awake. And so I don't feel as compelled to be a glutton on this, nothingness. TV did bring me joy. Like, it was good. And it's weird now how, without any conscious attempt to have that experience change, it still has changed. Because I'm realizing, even as I say this right now, it's because I've got some time back. I don't feel the need to like just indulge 100% in this thing. Like, I get to we watch some of the same shows now. Like, right. So
it's interesting that you say that, Kim, because I was going to kind of say the same thing. So Sarah and I are sisters. And so I'm the same as her, where when I want to do something, but like, well, I'm just going to get up at 5 o'clock and I'm going to train for this or whatever. And we've been doing this. We've done stuff together, extreme, like when we used to live together when we were younger and stuff. I like to do a lot of things. I start a lot of projects, but then I have kids and that stops. Because like Kim was saying, my kids are awake maybe a half hour or hour less than I need sleep. So there's not a lot of time in the day. They might get up at 5 a.m., right? Like before I went, like, and then we get up at 5:30.
Yeah, and, I did too.
And so it's kind of like I'm at this space where I just want to shut off, right? So when I do get up before them, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna be very quiet and just sit here and stare at the room and think about things without interruption. Like, what do I want to think about today? Marsupials? What an interesting thing, right? Like, just whatever, just like anything. And it's just interesting. We're trying to get my oldest to understand my bucket's empty sometimes and I need just time for me, or I need adult time. It's just like she needs kids time, but it's kind of a hard road. My youngest daughter understands it. She's like, oh, your bucket's empty? I'll just go play by myself. And I'm like, okay, you get it. But my oldest one's like, but I need you. I want my free time. I want to spend with you and suck all your energy. Like,
well, the good news, I don't know if anyone else here has a teenager, but the good news is that somewhere around 12 for a girl, I would say, I have a girl, so I can only speak about that, but they actually don't want to spend time with you. And so you look for many opportunities to spend time with them, and it is few and far between. And then you get more time back. I mean, I have so much time back now. My day looks actually quite different than it used to. I would do that as well, where I would get up early just to have a quiet coffee and not have to reheat it 10 times in the microwave. Like, it's very odd how all of a sudden it just shifts. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I have more time to breathe and to think about the things I want to do. I have so much more time to spend with my husband. We spend so much time together with the dog. And then our kid is basically living her own life over here doing other things. So, it does. That's what I mean about the seasons too, right? It changes. But when Bridgerton came out, for example, I can't remember, was that 2020? It was sometime in 2020, Bridgerton came out. I used my 5 a.m. time to binge watch that show because I do love TV. It's sort of connected to what I do with writing, and I love to see how stories are put together, so I can justify it sometimes if I feel the need to do that with my type A self. But that's how I used my 5 a.m. time for like a week.
That's how I talked myself into trying the 4% fix. I was like, if I can get up and just watch TV, then okay.
So why can't you? I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's exactly it. You can use that time for whatever you want. And it does not have to be some earnest thing. Like, it does not have to be anything that other people will go, ooh, that's so exciting that you're training for a marathon, or you're going to write a novel, or you're going to learn a new language. Like, it doesn't have to be anything like that.
It's just something for you.
Yeah, whatever it is that floats your boat. But for those of you with young kids, it's coming, and then it will just be there. And then you'll be like my husband, always trying to find times for like hugs and, I guess maybe we'll see her for 5 minutes today. Some days it's like that because there's to the room, and then it's downstairs for dinner, but then it's back up to the room, and then we go to our room, and it's just so different, but it will change.
Yeah. I live in like a constant knowing it's going to change. So wanting to spend all the time, and then also being like, oh, this is too much time. I have 4 things I need to do that require autonomy. But then like, oh, but then I'll be so sad in 4 years. Like I just keep on going back and forth.
And it's weird too, because you get used to the change of suddenly having all this time back to yourself. And then all of a sudden there's a conversation happening, and you're like, oh, wait, this is a thing I need to be present for. And so then you're so used to these really strange interactions that just feel, it's like, hey, Oh, okay. And then there's a few texts, and then that's like the extent of your entire interaction for the day. But then there's a meaningful conversation, and you have to remember, right, I have to go
like
back.
code switch back into parenting.
Yeah,
like, oh, just, I need to give you some guidance here.
Yeah, like, oh, this is happening. Like I have to, pay attention now and really listen to what's being said.
Just getting steamy.
What's happening? But it's also about, I think if you have kids, it's also about training them and the understanding. And some of them, like Meredith was saying, they get it easier and others don't. But, my daughter I have always been a writer through her entire life. And I was doing magazines when she was little. And they are on tight deadlines. And so there would just be times where it was, okay, you're going to make a mess. I mean, I tell a story in the book about the dog being covered in Vaseline, like that kind of stuff just happens. But then it also becomes easier to say, I'm going to do this thing and I need you to not interrupt me, right? If you need something, if it's an emergency, like if the house is on fire or someone's in big trouble, obviously interrupt me. But otherwise, you got to figure it out. So that is part, even if you want to sit and watch an hour of TV, it doesn't matter. They don't get to tell you that you can't do that because, again, you're a grown-up and you get to decide, even if you don't always feel like you do because your kids are in charge. I mean, they are, but try to instill that idea and then role model it for them too, so that they can understand why you're doing that, why it's important, why you need that, because they will also later be in a place where they need to understand that for themselves.
Totally. Like it's boundaries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some kids will be like, you'll be like, here's the boundary. And they're like, okay. And other ones will be like, this is the boundary. Is it here?
Can I just
You're like, no, it's here. It's here.
Yeah.
It's here. It's here. Like,
and that gets
that's
more
my
so.
oldest. We have to set the boundary with her. It's every day. Every day is the boundary. It's been every day for 6.5 years.
How old is she? Your oldest one? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
6 is hard though. I have 3 kids. 2 of mine have reached 6, and 6 is just exhausting.
But
it gets so much better.
Yes, 8 is great.
Yeah.
I love
8
it. Yeah, my 10-year-old is starting to be like the
You're
12-year-old,
on the
right?
cusp.
Like
Yeah.
On the cusp.
The cusp.
right. She loves spending time with me, and then doesn't want me to touch her. I'm like, oh, you're grumpy. She's like, don't, leave me alone. I'm like, come on.
This is what they're supposed to do. That is the progression. They are meant to be figuring out how to live their own lives and do their own things and make their own choices. And so we are really just there to make sure that they, have a roof and make,
Do our best. Can face it. They can face it when they get there.
And for people, I don't know, does anyone here not have kids?
Lindsay.
Okay. So here's the thing about not having kids with the 4% fix, because what I have found is that a lot of people who do not have children, because children are the ultimate excuse to get out of things and to not work late and to not be able to work on weekends. And so, really, those of us who have kids, we use our kids to our
detriment.
Disadvantage.
Detriment and advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, depending.
But the thing is, if you don't have kids, your work hours tend to expand past the normal hours that you would be working, like a more 9 to 5 or on a school day kind of schedule. And then it becomes hard to find time for yourself because you're always working, or, you just have a different kind of schedule. And so you have to push work away a little bit.
Work is your kid.
To find that time.
You totally pinned her because she is such a worker. If she's not working, she's studying and doing school and
if I didn't have
bettering
a kid,
herself.
That would have been me. And I guarantee you, when mine goes off, I hope I'm retired by then or I'm writing like one book every couple of years, because I will turn in to a workaholic. It will fill up because I like what I do also. And so it would just fill up all my time.
Yeah. When I read the book, I wasn't working as much because I think it was
COVID.
Maybe it was during the pandemic or it was something.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I have a ton of time to do all the creative projects I want. And I'm always like, I'm studying something or I'm taking some class or I'm, I don't know, painting something or writing a book or like I do everything. And then I started a job in which I work 55-hour weeks right now and they're late hours and all this stuff. And I was like, we're talking. I'm like, I should probably reread the book. I was like, actually, now that I think about it, all those things that I used to do, I mean, I still study and I just pass something and whatever, but all those things I used to do creatively just for me I was like, oh, I actually haven't been doing those at all.
Yeah.
So now you've inspired me to be like, I should probably rethink that because it's
because your seasons have changed too. I mean, when COVID first hit, and I was writing a ton, but it wasn't because I had all this time and energy and sudden creativity with everything being locked down. I had a house that was used to having on my own that I could write in every day, me and the dog. And then my husband was working from home. My kid was at home doing school. And so it completely just screwed everything up. And people were like, oh, you must just be, whipping through books. And I would see other authors who were like, oh, I'm on my sixth book of pandemic. I can't believe it. It's like, no, there is no more time. It's not like this sudden creative gift to have the whole world shut down. It was really challenging. And so I had to actually look at how I was managing the flow of my day too, because I had so much work and very little focus time because there was so much going on in my space. And for what I do, I need focus time. I need it to be. And then it was like I could hear my husband's conference calls. And now it's a little bit easier because school is back and, we've adjusted to the new normal a little more. But you do have to constantly be evaluating. I really miss doing those creative things just for myself. So I have to find at least a little bit of time that I can get them back in so that I don't completely lose the plot at some point, which is inevitable if you work way too much and you don't take any time for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think when you don't have kids, people just assume you have nothing but time for yourself because anytime you're not working, it's your own time. And that's true, but you will fill it because that's what we do. We just fill time.
Yeah. This interruption is brought to you by Unpublished. Do you want to know more about the members in Book Interrupted? Go behind the scenes? Visit our website at www.bookinterrupted.com.
Book Interrupted.
Not too many interruptions these days, I'm happy to report. Or maybe I'm just getting better at blocking out things. I would like to believe so. But I don't think that is the case. Perhaps what I am being more distracted by, or where I've been noticing the interruptions have been coming from lately, are inside my brain. I notice that when I'm in crunch time, like when there's a really big item on the to-do list, typically related to work or school, that all I need is to focus and get the thing done. And yet, that's the cue for my brain to be like, but what about this? I would like to interrupt you again with another random thought. And it's getting a bit ridiculous to the point that I just felt I had to do a recording of this interruption because I just caught myself doing it for the 100th time when I'm trying to get this one thing done. But I just find that amusing. I mean, if you're not laughing, you're crying. So it's kind of nice to be laughing about this, although I must admit, it is quite frustrating having random songs and ideas for choreography and thinking about, oh, that would be a nice shamanic journey, completely out of anything and everything. Oh, but alas, it never ceases to be entertaining.
Book Interrupted.
I have one other thing that my favorite thing of the book is the procrastinating. I have to say that word. I love it so much. I think I still use that word all the time and I'll do it for sure. And I know Sarah just loves to bake, so she just does it. But I always, if I'm trying to accomplish something, I'm like, oh no, I should bake something now and go in the kitchen.
My family does not even appreciate the muffins and the loaves and all the things I make now because it's just constant. There is endlessly muffins or a loaf of some kind in my kitchen because of the procrastinating. I didn't make up that term. There are lots of people procrastinating on Instagram if you want to, just go have a look.
If you want to procrastinate by looking up procrastinating, it's there. What should I make today?
Yes, no, I'm happy. There are more procrastinators. It's a good time.
It's not like baking necessarily, but I like to try to make things from scratch. They'll be like, maybe I could make that.
Baking's tricky to do that. You do need to typically follow a recipe with baking that's fairly precise, but
my next thing, I think I'm going to try to make oat milk, which is hard because it can be slimy.
It's not hard.
But you can get like amylase. I want to do it with Have you done it with amylase? I'm gonna get some from the wine store that they use for gluten-free beer, and then it'll make it like a little bit sweeter and not slimy. And you don't have to add any sugar. You can just do oats, water, salt, amylase. So that's my like next
project. This sounds a lot like the sourdough baking of 2020, where I did not get into that. I love to bake. I did not bake one loaf of bread because it's not my thing, and I wasn't interested in keeping the starter alive.
Yeah, I won't do the starter.
I killed my starter. Everybody told me it could not be done, and I was like, oh, I did it.
That's how you operate.
Yeah.
I just can't feed it every day. That's not me. Like doing it every day is not my personality.
Task.
I need it to be over in maximum 3 hours. Like even just making regular bread. I'm like, I'm not waiting for 4 hours while it sits on the counter.
I don't make bread. I find it very tedious and boring. And yes, fresh bread with butter is delicious, but I know a lot of great bakeries. Totally. And I just go pop out and get the bread there. But, you know, muffins, loaves. Oh my God, I make so many loaves. You have no idea how many loaves I make.
Banana bread?
Loaves. And banana breads, pumpkin, zucchini, blueberry, lemon.
Yeah, I want your loaves.
Well, maybe I should start just wrapping them up and shipping them. It's the thing I make when people are like sick or having surgery, or I always make banana loaves and drop them off. It's like, and then it's, you know, it's like the procrastinating baking that has a good
like a justification.
Okay. What is your favorite rhubarb recipe? Because I got rhubarb in our farm box. I'm not really a baker. I was like, oh no, I gave some of it away. I was like, I don't know what to do, so I started giving it to people.
Okay,
but maybe should try it.
Kitchen. Do you know Smitten Kitchen?
No.
What? Deb Perlman? Okay, she's amazing. Smitten Kitchen. She's in New York, and she would cook and bake out of this tiny apartment in Manhattan with her 2 kids and her husband. And so she has a delicious rhubarb loaf recipe. I like my rhubarb in pies the best, but rhubarb is probably one of my favorite things in the whole world. So I could go on and on. I won't, but I like rhubarb pie, rhubarb loaf, rhubarb muffins. I like stewed rhubarb on top of vanilla ice cream with a little vanilla, cinnamon, sugar.
Do you do any like savory rhubarb dishes? I haven't looked it up, but I was thinking maybe there's like a savory.
I'm not into savory rhubarb. Maybe I like my rhubarb. You know,
sweet.
It's like
I like my rhubarb sweet if it's
because
going to be
tart, and it goes so beautifully with a vanilla ice cream or
100%.
A vanilla loaf that has rhubarb in it. It's like that tart meets sweet. Oh God, no, I'm trying to grow rhubarb right now.
Oh my God. I have a rhubarb in my yard that I hate because I don't usually bake, because it's a prehistoric, out of control.
And it's probably huge.
It is
I'm
so
so jealous.
Well, listen, so my husband has like this truck topper, so he leaned it up against the fence and the rhubarb's underneath it, so it's been deprived of light and it's grown like this giant shaft to the sky now so that it can continue to like propagate. So I mean, if anyone needs rhubarb, I have enough to feed the world. It reminds me of Little Shop of Horrors.
Kim's in the Okanagan though. She can basically grow anything.
Plenty of sun.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, I want a new topic, no segue. And it's serious too, but you mentioned it earlier, Karma, and I do think it's important. What do we think about this Roe v. Wade situation? I think we should talk about it. I mean, I'm probably confident to guess that we're all appalled, but how did that happen?
I actually read this long article today in the New York Times that was exactly that. How did this happen? And it laid out exactly how this happened. And it really started like 12 years ago with the Tea Party and a variety of Republican initiatives and Republicans getting into certain positions of power and then being able to stack the Supreme Court bench, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because obviously this is the US. And, you know, I don't believe that the things that happen there do not affect us here. I think that is just the most ridiculous statement to say, well, you live in Canada, so what are you even worried about? Because it can happen here. It may not look exactly like that. It likely won't, because we have a much more solid abortion rights situation here in Canada. I think the support is 80% or something in our country. But there are plenty of people who are trying to change that here and want to see more restrictions. And so what I'm going to do personally is try to figure out how I can help here to make sure that there are communities that have no access to abortion, that have really limited access in our own country. And so I haven't figured it out yet because, it's just something that you start thinking about and you're like, well, how can I make the most impact outside of writing a check? The book I just wrote, my fiction is feminist, and a lot of it deals with reproductive health and all sorts of women's issues, and feels impossible that this is happening. I was just writing about Roe v. Wade in my novel, and I was just thinking, like, how is this happening that 50 years of precedent and women are losing rights? So, I mean, I'm like heartbroken for them and furious, and
it makes it hard for me to take it serious. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so outrageous.
I know. And it's just the beginning. That's the problem. It is not just the beginning, going to just be this. And it's not just abortion rights, it's privacy, which then is the precedent in all these other cases for same-sex marriage, contraception. So they're in for a wild ride. And I think that, we can just try to do what we can to keep anything even close to that from happening here. Yeah, and I was talking to my daughter about it yesterday and trying to explain, she's wise and she's heard me talk about feminist issues a lot. Even the other day I was saying, I wish you would actually just clean up things more. And she was like, wow, as a feminist, because I'm a girl, you shouldn't really be pushing that on me. And I was like she had my number, because it's true. I worry about
we should get dad involved with this.
Right. You have to be able to clean up your space. But I also think that you don't want to domesticate your girls to believe that they are the ones who need to be responsible for that simply because they're female. So, it's just such my daughter's old enough that these kinds of things, she understands them. They're relevant. They're going to be relevant soon enough, at 14. But it's a hard conversation to explain. She was just like, I don't understand how this happened. And then she was like, why can't Biden fix it? It's just not how it works. Nobody can fix it now.
Yeah. Now they had an opportunity to
Biden actually could have fixed it.
And they didn't take that opportunity. Yeah. And now there's a whole bunch of suffering that is going to happen, and it's going to affect people who don't have resources way more than people who do. So it's just going to create a greater divide in kind of the have and have nots as well. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of the rights that could potentially be taken away over the next how many years. Yeah, I just don't even know. And the thing is, in the States, support for abortion rights is actually really high amongst the population. It's just these Republicans in power wanted something else. It's just another example of the power dynamics there. The people who have the power can affect so many people. It's not really a democracy, because the majority of the people want one thing, and the people who are in power are deciding a different thing for their own agenda, whatever that agenda is, whether it is just kind of a religious thing or if it goes beyond that, more of a controlling the populace type thing.
It sounds like it's more of a political thing than even a religious thing at this stage, and it will predominantly affect non-white women, of course, and people who don't have privilege, don't have access. And anyway, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing as a woman and raising a woman, and it's unacceptable to me, actually, that our children could have fewer rights as women than we do now.
And it's hard to, I have 2 girls, and you want to raise them to believe that they have as much worth as anybody else. And being a woman does not make them less worthy of anything. And at the same time, our world is giving them a different message. And trying to explain that to them without instilling that unconscious bias that, in fact, they are lesser because they were born female, right? It's like you can tell them and you can try to teach them to have self-worth. And at the same time, they are still going to have to feel that self-worth in opposition to what is happening around them. It's just so much harder to, I don't know.
And we need
not just for the girls, but then the boys. You can try to instill into your boys, women and men are inside. We're all humans. We're the same in a way. And at the same time, they're saying, well, but not really, because you guys have less rights than us. Yes, value. Yeah. And I see that in our media and the stories, and not just stories, but the political landscape and And it's just just a shit thing that to be happening, like going back in time,
Yeah,
it
I know.
seems like we're going
This
back
is a
in
big
time.
deal. 50 years of precedent, just like a race like that. So that's why, when people are like, it won't happen here. It's like, well, no, that's
never.
not necessarily true.
Right, never say never.
It may not look exactly like that, but I don't think you can take those sorts of things for granted. But I do hope this next generation that's coming up is, they just won't take it the same way. It won't even be a question as to let's think about what our worth is, comparing our genders, comparing the color of our skin. It just isn't going to be a thing that they discuss. They will have more important and different issues to talk about, and that will just be settled. The boys become allies for the young women, and then the people of color and the indigenous populations have an opportunity for voice, and they get their platforms. And it's just, we have a lot of work to do here for sure. So all eyes are focused on the States, but there's so many things not working well in Canada, and it's hard to know how to fix it. I spend a lot of time trying to think about what I can do, again, outside of writing a check or having those discussions and looking for opportunities with platforms, like ensuring if I'm invited to speak somewhere as an author, that it is not an all-white panel, or it is not, there's just lots of little things that you can try to do, but it's still just, it feels like such a huge, overwhelming issue to tackle.
I've been thinking about this lately. There's all this outrage, and, when Roe v. Wade happened so many years ago, protesting what was happening in the government, I think, was different. And now we've got social media, and there's, political people like pay companies to go on social media and manipulate people's voting and stuff. Like there's all this, it's a whole other game. And the people who are in power are the ones with the money and the access and know how to manipulate the rest of us. And I don't know if the rest of us who want the changes know how to fight that yet, and that's part of what the problem is. And I've been thinking about this lately. Until we figure that out, how do we stop all these terrible things from happening? And do the people with money, are they one step ahead, and are they going to remain one step ahead because they have access to, all the resources? And I don't know. It all seems very Big either. Brother. Like it makes me think of when I heard that, my mind went to that movie V for Vendetta, where right? I was like, this is like V for Vendetta, and everybody's just too scared. But that's where it's going in a way. That's fiction, but it's based on what could happen if everybody.
It's based on someone's imagination of everything going completely sideways and turning upside down. But one of the things I read this morning when I was on my Twitter journey was talking about the things you can do and starting small. And it isn't about the big gestures. And it was between two people who were having an argument. There was some dad who climbed a bridge to protest Roe v. Wade being overturned. And people were like, this is ridiculous. One, climbing a bridge does nothing. And he got a lot of media attention for it, but it doesn't do anything, right? And the person who was arguing this was saying, real change happens in the small things, showing up at the places where the work is already being done, because those organizations exist. So find those organizations in your community, show up, mop the floors, take out the garbage, do the coffee run, help with printing the materials, help with the communication, like go in and figure out what are the small things you can do to help the organization that's already figured out some of that, how to be more effective, how to be more efficient. Don't go climb the bridge and make some big statement that goes in the news for one day and then just, it doesn't mean anything. It's performative, right? So for me, that was meaningful for me. And I thought, okay, that's then where I'll start. I'll figure out who's doing what and how I might be able to
support
just show up and support that. Yeah.
So it's funny because, and this might be a stretch, but I can see this, that you just 4% fixed how to get involved, right? Because you just totally simplified it down.
It wasn't my idea. I will. It was
no, but it makes really good sense, and it's similar to the 4% fix. Like if you can't do this, just do that. Like 15 minutes, whatever. You may not know what to do, but go to the places that do know what to do and help them keep on doing it.
Yeah, or do it better, or help them.
Yeah. Grease their wheels. Yeah,
exactly. Like don't reinvent it. Join the wheels that are already going, and help over there. So. That felt meaningful for me. And then it's community level. And so you're supporting, you know, your own community. And if everyone does that, then
you're
the
investing.
overall impact is massive.
Well, I didn't think it was possible, but you made me feel better. Like, seriously.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. You know, I hope there's lots of opportunity for people to have conversations like this, you know, in the future. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it on a show that is not about that today. It's all related.
It's relevant. Like
is.
This show isn't about that, but it's happening, and we're doing this show right now. So it should be a little bit about that. We don't want to ignore it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. Like, we really appreciate the book you wrote and coming and giving us your advice.
Karma, what are you working on now? Or what's your most current book, or what's happening with you?
I am working on a book called What Wild Women Do, which is coming out in 2023. And it's set in 1975 and 2023, though I may switch it to 2022 because of what's just happened, because I don't know what's going to be happening next summer. But it's about two women in those time periods set in the Adirondacks. And there's a mystery at the center of the story that connects these two women together over the course of these 50 years. And so it's similar to Recipe for a Perfect Wife. If anyone has read that one, that was my most recent fiction. So that's what I'm doing.
Look forward to reading it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on today. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.
It was so nice getting to talk to you too.
And procrastinating and everything in between.
Right on.
Yeah.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Book Interrupted. If you'd like to see the video highlights from this episode, please go to our YouTube channel, Book Interrupted. You can also find our videos on www.bookinterrupted.com.
Hi, this is Leah from Book Interrupted. We'd love to get to know all of our members way more. So write in to our fan episodes, comment, like, subscribe, the works. Because we want to get to know you, hear what you think about our podcast, and more. Go to www.bookinterrupted.com and please keep listening.
Moments you can look forward to on next week's Book Interrupted.
You want to read Fun Home? They're like, she's going to read Fun Home. It's so good.
So it's cool because it makes you, it like forces this higher level of attention. It's definitely a different like brain strategy.
I feel embarrassed even talking about it's just a drawing.
I mean, I don't have time to read 79 books during this book cycle, but I'm sure there's going to be some of those that I will read.
Movies there are that don't have two women talking to each other about something other than a man.
Banned books with wine.
Banned books with
rebranding. We're rebranding.
Book Interrupted.
Never forget, every child matters.